Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by Noodler's, and which I kind of only have in sample form. Noodler's Bad Green Gator. And for those of you familiar with Noodler's, you'll know that the bad designation means that it's part of the Warden series, which means, and excuse me, I'm going to have to read this off a separate piece of paper, but it is UV resistant, bleach resistant, archival, and fade resistant. Not archival resistant like it's archival grade. Anyways, I can speak. It resists lasers, alcohol, solvents, ideal for and solvents, making it ideal for security documents, and it is fully waterproof. So, yeah, it's their green in the Warden series. God, I can't speak today. I apologize. It's an interesting green. All the tests were done in this Waterman Hemisphréré. The nib says fine, but if you'll look at the nib, I'm sure we've all had those days where we lend a pen to someone who really doesn't know how to use them. And this happened in college, and this was essentially the only way I could get it to work. And so this is now the finest nib, like the most narrow line nib that I own. So it really is an extra fine. It's even more fine than some designated extra fines that I have. So thought I'd compare it to some other inks. So here's Bad Green Gator, and here's a water test, an ammonia test, an alcohol test, and a bleach test. And as you can see, the bleach kind of made it turn this very bright green, which we'll see in the other test because I incorporated a bleach test. Here's Diatramentis' Charles Dickens, which actually held up pretty well under all the same tests except for bleach. Private Reserve Ebony Green, which did not do so well. I think it only did this well just because, as you can see, how heavily saturated it is. Like, look at all that sheen. Diatramentis Black Green did not do so well, especially the bleach test. And Noodler's General of the Armies, which is supposed to darken and turn almost like a greenish navy blue, but for some reason my sample doesn't appear to be doing that. It just sort of stays this very light green, and it had some trouble with a few of the solvents. But anyways, chromatography. As you can see, this is one of those interesting chromatographies where what you're supposed to do is put a little bit of ink and then instantly dunk it in the water. But since this is a permanent ink, you can see that it's trying to bond with the fibers of the paper. But as you can see, it's really just green, green, and more green. It's just different sort of types. Here we've got more of a foresty green. And then, because lately I've been doing this thing where I let it dry, here I let it dry for a minute. As you can see, that circle around the initial spot is larger. And then 2 minutes, the circle is, like the thickness of it is larger. 3 minutes, again, larger. And then 5 minutes, which is essentially fully dry, you can see that it completely remains. So once this ink has an opportunity to bond with fiber, it really isn't going to wash off. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. As you can see, the only pen I used in these tests was that really extra fine, because I had at first put it in that extra fine and started using it and realized, oh, okay, maybe just test the extra fine, because it is a bit problematic. 3.5 seconds to dry, which really isn't too bad, but you do get this extremely sort of woolly texture in the writing. Like it just reminds me of like a steel wool scrubby pad that you'd use in your kitchen. Yeah, it's, but because the line is so small, I really didn't know if it was, like if you look at the dots or the sort of the ends of lines, I don't know if you would consider that feathering, since there's so little ink, but yeah, and I don't know if this is going to come up on camera, but yeah, you can sort of see this shadow, this echo through the paper, and this is 90 gram paper, and this is an extra fine nib, and so that is really not great. But as you can see, water test didn't even blink an eye. The bleach test, now, okay, my camera is turning this like vibrant like highlighter green, but really it's just sort of a lighter shade of green. So it did change, but it's definitely not gone. Next is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where it dried almost instantly, as you might be able to see. But you still have this very woolly texture. You still have this woolly that almost looks like feathering. I mean, if you look at the X in boxing. And yeah, it has, I say it has no shading, but it has very little shading. It'll be at the very end of strokes, and it's subtle. Again, we have this noticeable, and that's not, the light is coming from this direction, so like it's this sort of faint echo of writing. But again, water test did not blink. Bleach test just turned a lighter green, not highlighter green. But next is Tomoe River, where for the first time it really seemed to start to behave itself. Here we do see some shading, just a little bit, like at the ends. You know, like at the top of the N, top of the W, bottom of the R, but just a little. And even here it retains a little bit of that woolly texture. But yeah, so here's the first point where we see, you know, no near bleed, no real feathering, no spread. But I don't know if this is going to come through on camera, but there is a significant amount of echo, considering this is actually sort of, I'd call it a medium green. It's not a dark green. So the fact that, I mean, look, you can read that. You can very clearly read that. I mean, this is a very aggressive ink, and this is very thin paper, so definitely something to watch out for. Now, this water test was impressive. Tomoe River, once you add more water, it loves to just let everything wash away. But here, yeah, no, really did not blink, which is very impressive. And again, the bleach didn't get rid of it, it just sort of turned it a more vibrant green. Next up is probably the world's worst copy paper. So the results are kind of as you would expect them to be. There was a massive amount of bleeding and feathering and spread, especially for an extra fine nib. I mean, that's a lot of bleed for the finest nib I own. That was really not very impressive. There's no shading really. I mean, I'd say there isn't. Water test, you can see the paper started to come apart. That's why it looks kind of hazy, but it's still really, really there. Bleach, again, just turned it brighter green. Next is Mead Notebook Paper, where, oh, also it dried almost instantly on there, and on Mead Notebook Paper, it dried almost instantly again. Here you still have that very intense woolly texture. You also have a great deal of spread. You also have feathering. Yeah. I mean, I know this is cheap paper, but an extra fine, I would expect a little bit better than this. So, yeah. Again, water test did not blink. Bleach test just turned a lighter green. And lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, but this is that really well-behaved Moleskine notebook paper, the stuff that acts like a super premium paper when it shouldn't, because Moleskine generally doesn't. But even here, I want you to see this, even here it had a lot of problems. I mean, look at this extreme feathering and wooliness. And it's not localized, it is all throughout. It is just everywhere. It took 3.5 seconds to dry. And there was bleed. Like I don't know if you can see this, but this side of the paper is like really shiny. More than this side. You see how this side isn't shiny? This side is. So it's almost as if there's something weird about the pressing here, and I think that's why this paper was behaving really well. But even here, you can see that this ink bled through this super paper. So, yeah, I really don't think that this ink plays well with just about any paper. Water test, again, didn't blink. It was already that feathery, and bleach just turned a lighter color. So there you go. There's Noodler's Bad Green Gator. I would love a, you know, super permanent green. This one, however, just seems to be a bit temperamental. And I had actually used it in another pen, a previous sample, in, I think it was like a pretty wet medium, and it behaved just as badly, regrettably. And I thought it was a bun batch, so I got another sample. That does not appear to be the case. Yeah, but again, this is only my personal test. This isn't the end-all be-all results. I highly recommend that you try this out for yourself. So for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.